style and honest income. He held up a bottle filled with a rich amber liquid. The label featured a cartoon character and read, Green Guardian India Pale Ale Style Root Beer. He was selling an astonishing amount of this crafted beverage to the friendly residents of their tight-knit community. Business was undeniably booming. However, today brought a unique kind of pressure. Richard had announced that he was going to share a monumental piece of news with the entire neighborhood later that afternoon. "I have to get this entire batch properly bottled and sealed," Bubbles muttered, working the lever of his capping machine. Richard ordered 22 cases for the celebration. This news must be absolutely earth-shattering. Bubbles was positively thrilled. Just then, Julian walked up to the stand, his trademark glass of iced tea held securely in his right hand. Julian was the planner of the group, a man who always sought the next grand opportunity, though recently, his opportunities had been rather scarce. "Good morning, Bubbles," Julian greeted, leaning casually against the wooden counter. "How is the craft beverage business treating you today?" "It is absolutely astonishing, Julian," Bubbles replied, his face beaming with pure joy. "It is so much more rewarding than our previous, misdirected adventures." Julian took a sip of his drink, looking thoughtfully at the rows of neatly organized bottles. "I have been doing some heavy thinking. Why do you not formulate a special performance beverage? You could put my name and face on the label. We could call it the Muscle Man. Do you see the humor in that?" Bubbles chuckled politely but kept his focus on his work. "So, what do your financial reports look like?" Julian pressed, leaning a bit closer. "Are you generating a solid profit margin?" Bubbles stopped capping bottles and looked Julian directly in the eyes. "My sales are quite spectacular, actually, but I can clearly see the direction this conversation is heading." "What direction?" Julian asked, feigning innocence. "I am generating a stable income, and suddenly, you possess a deep, burning passion for the artisanal soda industry," Bubbles stated firmly. "Please do not attempt to manipulate the situation. I watch those television programs about business investors too. I understand all of the corporate terminology you are using." Julian sighed, his broad shoulders slumping slightly. The facade of the confident businessman faded, revealing the exhausted friend underneath. "Bubbles, I am in a terrible financial situation. I have zero funds. I truly do not know what my next step should be. I am trying my hardest to live a legitimate life, but the transition is proving to be incredibly difficult. I had a lovely date last night to watch a film, and my companion had to purchase the snacks. Do you have any idea how deeply embarrassing that is for a man?" Bubbles softened, his natural empathy taking over. "Julian, I advised you earlier. You should not be attending expensive cinemas when you are trying to balance a tight budget. The prices at those establishments are famously inflated." "I was watching a movie in my own living room, Bubbles," Julian confessed, looking down at his shoes. "I could not even afford a simple box of microwavable snacks from the local grocery store. Things are very dire for me right now." Bubbles felt a pang of sympathy. He reached under his counter, pulled out a crisp bill from his earnings box, and slid it across the wooden surface. "You are worrying too much. Please, take this." Julian looked at the money, pride wrestling with necessity. "That is a pathetic amount. I do not desire your charity." "You clearly require a little assistance right now," Bubbles countered gently. "You could not afford simple corn kernels for your date. Take it, and please try to appreciate the gesture." Before Julian could respond, Richard marched into the clearing. His clothes were rumpled, and his left arm was covered in minor, albeit painful-looking, scratches and bandages. He was grumbling loudly about the neighborhood stray cats being overly aggressive. "Richard, what in the world happened to your arm?" Bubbles asked, his eyes wide with concern. "Did you have a disagreement with that wonderful woman you have been seeing?" Julian added, raising an eyebrow. Richard shook his head, looking exhausted. He had been courting a woman named Susan for the past 4 or 5 months. It had been a transformative experience for him. He had genuinely forgotten how comforting it was to have a partner to share his daily life with. While she possessed a very strong personality that was sometimes difficult to navigate, their emotional connection was profound. "No, Susan and I are perfectly fine," Richard explained, leaning against Bubbles' counter. "Actually, Corey, Jacob, and I decided to go roller skating on the gravel paths near the old quarry last night. It was a remarkably enjoyable time until we hit a loose patch of stones. We fell down to the ground with incredible force. Jacob suffered the brunt of the impact. I truly believe that they should not use gravel for paving. It is simply not conducive to recreational skating." Julian narrowed his eyes, clearly skeptical of this elaborate story. "Roller skating on gravel in the middle of the night? How and where did you three even acquire the roller skates? You surely did not purchase them." "We absolutely did not steal them, if that is what you are implying," Richard said defensively. "We purchased them from that wonderful new sporting goods shop that opened near the center of town." Just as Richard finished his sentence, Jacob walked up. He was moving stiffly, holding his chest, his clothing torn in several places, revealing small bruises that looked suspiciously like he had run full speed into a thorny thicket. "Why are there tiny scratches all over Jacob's chest?" Julian demanded. "What actually occurred last night, Richard?" "They are minor scrapes from the gravel during our skating incident," Richard insisted, his voice rising in panic. "Do not fabricate stories for me," Julian said softly but firmly. "You were engaging in something foolish, were you not?" Richard looked at Julian, then at Bubbles, and finally at his daughter, Trinity, who had just walked over carrying a basket of laundry. The weight of his secret became too heavy to bear. He let out a long, defeated sigh. "You are correct," Richard confessed, looking at the ground. "Trinity, my friends, I am deeply sorry. I have been keeping a massive secret from all of you for the entire summer. I was not attending classes to upgrade my small engine repair certification, and I was not taking that heavy machinery operation course I proudly spoke about. I was secretly cultivating a massive garden of organic herbs deep in the forest." "Father," Trinity gasped, her face falling in disappointment. "You made a sincere promise to me that you would stop these risky behaviors." "I am aware, and I am truly sorry," Richard pleaded, his eyes shining with regret. "But you must understand, it was a spectacular project. I collaborated with a professional horticulturist from the city. I set up a complex irrigation system. I nurtured 75 plants until they were nearly 8 feet tall. It was a beautiful sight." "I do not care about the size of the plants, Richard," Julian said, his voice laced with frustration. "I had arranged a single, fully negotiated transaction," Richard continued, desperate to make them understand his motivation. "If it had been successful this morning, I would have achieved financial security for the rest of my life. I would have been completely retired." Trinity shook her head. "None of that matters. You brought my husband, Jacob, into a dangerous situation in the middle of the night." "He volunteered to accompany me," Richard offered weakly. "That does not excuse your lack of judgment," Julian reprimanded him. "The endeavor is over. The garden is gone. You must let this foolish dream fade away and focus on reality." Julian crossed his arms, looking sternly at Richard. "I should have known your monumental announcement was going to be related to some sort of illicit agricultural scheme." "No!" Richard exclaimed, waving his hands frantically. "That is not what the grand announcement is about at all. It is something entirely different. It is far more significant than a ruined garden." Bubbles paused his work, leaning forward. "So, there is still a major announcement? And you still require all of this artisanal beverage?" "Yes, I certainly do," Richard confirmed, regaining a sliver of his usual confidence. "There is a massive announcement arriving very soon. It is incredibly huge. You will all be amazed." Julian sighed again. It had better be an extraordinary revelation